Hi, I'm Michel Bayan, and welcome to the Source DS. Hey everybody, so today's an interesting day in the history of Source DS. It's the first time that I've had a guest back for a second time, and this is going to be Dan Burrus. Many of you may remember his name. He was the keynote speaker at the 2016 DSA annual meeting that really kind of kicked off a lot of what would be the theme of that meeting, which was this idea of understanding the future and that we can't just do business from the way things are anymore because things are changing so quickly. The only way for us to get ahead and to win is to be able to better anticipate the future, what trends are coming our way, and be able to act in advance of that. And our conversation is really kind of cyclical, but there's really two main theories or theses of these conversations. We're talking a lot about the FTC and the regulatory environment, which is something that's really important to the direct selling channel right now. Dan shares some really interesting perspectives, and it was a good conversation about, is there a silver lining here for us? What are the kind of ways that we can look at this situation? And do we have to be in resistance to it? Or can we let go of that resistance and look and see what kind of opportunities lie there? And that led us into technological unemployment, a growing topic here in the channel about automation and the number of jobs that are going to be lost to robots and self-driving cars and AI over the future, and how direct selling can be and put itself in a position to be able to absorb these millions and millions of people who will be ejected from the job market, many of whom will not or cannot train up to do something better and are going to need a source of income. So how do we do that? And we started to have a little bit of that conversation, and it all kind of boils down into data. I won't give you a spoiler alert here, but it's good 30 minutes of solid business strategy and really, really great perspectives, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Okay, Dan Burrus, welcome back to the Source DS. Happy to have you again.
Great to be with you.
So just as a reminder to everyone out there, you gave a keynote at last year's DSA annual meeting, and it got a lot of people thinking. That conversation has really reverberated across the industry about this idea of being what you call an anticipatory organization, looking and not operating from what's happening today, but really looking into the future, learning and getting better and better at predicting that future and acting in advance of that. And so along with that discussion, I want to just dive right in with you and talk about a recent article that you wrote about finding the advantage in regulation. The regulatory space is a big, big challenge for direct sellers in the space right now. The FTC has had two settlements in the last year, one with Herbalife for $200 million and another one with Vima, where they've created kind of through these settlements, kind of de facto new rules that really change a lot of the way direct selling companies are going to need to do business, starting with a kind of a mandate to separate the people that are really their customers from the people that are really their reps and not allowing everyone to kind of be in that same bucket anymore. And what I'm seeing is that there's two sort of ways of thinking in the industry about this problem. There's a one camp that is they're in a fight, right? They're really in defense mode, and they're fighting for their right to be able to do it the way they've always done it, or as close to as they've always done it as possible, with absolute minimal compliance. Where is the absolute minimum that I can comply with this thing so I can just go on doing it the way I want, right? And then there's the second camp, which is looking to see, well, what's really going on in this? Is the FTC by having us look at who our customers are and separating them out from our distributors, actually giving us a clue that we might want to start treating people differently, that maybe our customers want to have an experience that's more customer focused and not be getting distributor type communications? Is there a way for us to learn from maybe a data perspective? If we can separate all these people out, we can learn more about them, serve them better, attract them better. And so these are the two sort of camps. And I'd love you to bring the context a lot of what you talk about observing trends and your perspective on regulation and how it might be something to be looked at positively. Can you share some thoughts on that?
Well, yes. And, one of the things that I write about, not only in my last book, Flash Foresight, but speak a lot about, and that is whatever problem you've got, that's not it. There's another problem. If you're trying to solve the one that you think you're trying to solve, and that's usually not correct, you'll never get there. You've got to get down to what the real problem is. And so I think we haven't really defined the problem correctly. And one of the real problems here is that the FTC and the government has misconceptions about what direct selling is. For
That is
example,
absolutely true.
and because they don't really know what it is, therefore, whenever they try to regulate it, they're going to be regulating, frankly, the wrong thing because they don't know what it is in the first place. And that's our fault. That's this industry's fault. That's not the regulator's fault. That's our fault. For example, this is not a direct selling industry. It isn't an industry. This is a business model. And if I were to reframe it myself, if you were to say, hey, Dan, how would you reframe it? I would call it an economic empowerment model, because what we're doing is economically empowering individuals all over the world. And I think, so part of it is we got to get a message, and the old message isn't working. Obviously, we need a new message around what we're doing that fits our times. And we all know that technology, robotics, automation of logistics, and artificial intelligence and so on is going to continue to displace a lot of workers from bigger established organizations and companies. So where are they going? What are they going to do? Nothing. And the answer is, something that's always been very powerful is relationships. And even though we're in the technological world, we're actually in a human world, and we can't forget that. And the human world is all based on relationships. And of course, there are bad relationships and good relationships. And good relationships are all based on trust. And of course, trust is something you have to earn. Well, feet on the street, what that means is having somebody, a human, who is local, that can establish a relationship, hopefully an ongoing relationship. And that's difficult for large companies to be able to do. And this, I'll call it the economic empowerment model, this business model that sometimes we refer to as improperly as the direct selling model, is an amazing model for doing just that, because it is about feet on the street. In other words, the people that are out there where the actual customer is. And once again, we have let, again, I say we, meaning our industry, has let the confusion between the customer and the distributor and who that is and are they really the same person. We've let that happen because of how we run our businesses and how we communicate. So if we're communicating the same to a customer as we are to a distributor, they're the same person. So I think it's really a matter of sitting back and looking at how do we, first of all, together, not as a company, but bigger, as an industry, decide we're going to frame and teach government, in this case the FTC, what we really are and help them to understand what we are. Also, at the same time, what we are not. So when they do start regulating, they will understand what they're regulating. Because right now, they don't have a clue. They're as confused as anybody else.
It's true. And even, just there was an article I read recently about like how they took that $200 million they got from Herbalife and kind of doled it back out to the people that they decided were the ones that had, gotten damages from Herbalife. And then you see on social media that a lot of existing Herbalife reps are like getting checks from the FTC going, rock and roll. I never thought anything was wrong in the first place. I've been doing Herbalife this whole time and I just got a check from the government.
Well, so you just gave a perfect example of how the whole thing is all messed up.
Completely.
And by the way, if it continues to be in its current state, and if you're a large company in protect and defend mode, protecting the past and trying to defend the way it's always been, then I'll predict you'll be in increasing trouble, because everything is becoming more and more transparent as it becomes more digital. We start to, and this is not just for us as a company, but government as well, can start doing analytics and see where things are going and how things are being done, not just in the United States, but on a global level. And that means that, we've got to be not just in protect and defend mode, but let me give you the other mode I want you to be in. And I call it the embrace and extend mode. And that is to embrace the new realities, the new hard trends, those future facts that are shaping the future. And not once you've embraced that, we aren't going backwards. You can never go backwards. You can only go forwards. And that the good old days for this industry are not behind us. They're ahead of us, but they don't look like the good old days. They're what I would call the good new days. Very similar to retail. For example, I've talked to a lot of large retailers that are looking at, in this country, Sears and others, JCPenney's and all of these that are closing hundreds of stores and laying off thousands of people, and they think the good old days of retail are behind us. And at the same time, you've got companies like Amazon opening up bookstores and, by the way, grocery stores, brick and mortar versions, as well as other companies that were online only, now opening up physical, real brick and mortar stores. They think something different. They think the good old days are actually ahead of us. What they realize is that the good old days of the future don't look like the good old days of the past. We need a different customer experience in that brick and mortar. So in that same sense, this industry, this business model that, again, I choose to call the economic empowerment model, because it really does do that on an individual level. It's very powerful. And as you said in the setup, you got 40 cents on the dollar coming back. That's a lot of money. That's good. So
yeah. And, to add on that, Dan, you said something about analytics and data, and I want to just get back to that before we get too far away from it, because, I think one of the challenges that we had with the regulatory situation was that when the FTC came a knock-in and they were like, hey, I want to know data about your customers, there wasn't any. And because companies haven't really been doing much of a job at all of creating ways of keeping, storing, analyzing, interpreting the data that they have, or in many cases, not even collecting any data at all from their customers. And it's understandable, they've got a balancing act to play sometimes, especially when you're bringing somebody on board. You don't want to have them fill out an application that, gets a lot of data from them, because that might impact your ability to convert into a sale, because they might be one too many fields, for them to fill out. But there are other ways along the way. And like you said, if you're looking forward, you can kind of get into that mindset of how do you learn more about who your people are over time in ways that make them want to communicate with you, rather than having the mindset of, oh, we don't do that, which got us in trouble.
Right, exactly. And you get the behaviors you reward, first of all. So, you can determine rewards for behaviors, and rewards don't have to be money. For example, sometimes recognition can be good.
Yeah, it's a huge thing in direct selling.
And we could give you countless others that, don't rely on monetary, but are indeed considered a reward. So the second element of that is, and in sales, they call this kind of a drip campaign on a website, but it's where you offer something for free, and then, but you can, if you do that and you want a little bit more, you can spend a little bit and get this, and then you can get this bigger thing if you give me your name, and you get this bigger thing if you give me your address. And even before you get to exchange of money, you can get a lot of information because you're giving value for the information.
That's right. And a lot of these companies, I don't blame anyone. Look, these companies were making a lot of money doing it the way they were doing it. And there wasn't really any kind of significant pressure. We always used to say when I was in the field in direct selling, people are much more motivated by fear of loss than they are by hope of gain, right? There wasn't a lot of fear of loss motivating companies to get data collected or interpreted. They were making a bunch of money. There was hope of gain, but they're like, hey, we're making billions over here. Like, we're good. And so I think people got blindsided by that.
Well, yeah. And by the way, Sears was making a lot of money too. And now they're closing 126 stores, laying off 5,000, and that's just the current round. So just because you're making a lot of money doesn't mean you're safe. Actually, when you're at doing extremely well and you're making a lot of money is when you should be really looking at how can I reinvent myself before some competitor does it in my place. And as you know, there's a lot of churn, not just customer churn and distributor churn, but hey, there's a lot of business churn. I mean, the old guard kind of becomes old, and the new ones come in and start grabbing let's call it the new money.
Yeah, great point. Let's transition. I think this leads into what you had already started mentioning, which is this idea of technological unemployment. And to frame this for people really quickly, technological unemployment is a term that is related to the way that AI and robotics and automation are beginning already now and are predicted to do at an extremely rapidly accelerating rate to essentially destroy jobs. Think about self-driving cars, think about robots manufacturing just about anything. In the last week, I saw a robot that lays bricks, a robot that makes cars, and a robot that helps 3D printers make 3D printing faster somehow. That was just in the last week. So we're seeing this trend already where jobs are going to be destroyed and there really aren't going to be enough created to replace them. So people are going to have two choices. Some of them will be able to train up, and many will not or cannot train up. And that's going to be to the tune of millions or tens or maybe even globally hundreds of millions or even 1 billion people over the next 15 years. So we're, I think, in a situation that's very interesting as a direct selling channel is that from an economic perspective, we take people and we make them the center of a good or service in their community. And like you were saying, our comp plans pay 40, sometimes 50 cents on the dollar back to the community that generated that sale. So doesn't that look like a lot of potential?
Well, it absolutely is. And first of all, there are millions and millions of jobs that are going away. But does that mean that they won't be replaced? Well, that would be what I would call a soft trend, meaning it's not a future fact, it's an if or a maybe. What I mean by that is that as the old jobs go away, and of course the first ones to go away are always the ones that you don't need a lot of education and training to do, manual labor and repetitive tasks and so on and so forth. But as that continues to move along, humans need to be retrained. They need to be re-educated. And they say you can't teach an old dog a new trick. The good news is we're not dogs. We can continue to learn new things. But so there are going to be people that fight that. They're going to protect and defend their old knowledge, meaning I don't want to learn anything new. And as you and I both know, they're going to be in trouble. But for those that are willing to learn new things and explore new possibilities, well, actually, we have just as many new jobs that are being created as old jobs being lost, but those new jobs don't look like the old jobs, and they do require for some retraining. So, first of all, yes, we will have lots of people that will be under or unemployable because they did not learn new things. But we're not talking about just the world in general. We're applying it to this industry and what we do. And this is about the importance of training and education to make sure that our salespeople, our distributors, really understand how to use new tools. For example, how good are they at social media? And by the way, if they were good at social media 2 years ago, it doesn't mean they're good at social media today or
That's
2
right.
years from now. How good are they at communities? But they're used to a physical, tangible community. But actually, they should be also good at communities of practice and communities of interest, especially communities of interest, which are electronic communities. And they could be selling into that. Well, many of them would say, I don't know anything about that. And I would say, good, think of the potential of doing that along with the physical, tangible communities that you know. My point is, even an individual working by themselves anywhere on the planet is being empowered with inexpensive and powerful technology.
That's right. I was actually, remind me, I had Jared Richards on the other day, who was the president of Jamberry, a really fast-growing direct selling company. And one of the things that he told me about the way that they do business that's very different from a lot of direct selling companies is, as opposed to having a model, a lot of companies have a model that is basically like, look, this is the way we do things here. And if you're going to be in this, we're going to train you to do this. And if you're not going to do it this way, then you're going to be on your own, and we're not really going to offer you, much support. But the way Jamberry did it is they found that a lot of people want to do a direct selling business in a different way. Some people want to host parties and they want to be that social center of their community physically in the real world and have people over their house and do the whole thing and party and make money. Some people don't want to see other people at all. They want to hide behind their computer from 10 at night to 1 in the morning, do all their stuff online from computers and make their money, via social media and online and even ad buying. And so there's all these different ways to be able to do it. And I think that these ways are going to diversify even more and more over time, right? So companies need to, would we call that a hard trend? Am I right?
Well, yeah, yes, in that, we all have different strengths and weaknesses. Thank goodness. If every human on the planet had the same strength and the same weaknesses, they would be all messed up. It's kind of like if we all wanted to live in the same place, that would not be good either. But luckily, some people like cold climates, some people like warm climates. Well, good. If they all like the same thing, we would all want to live in the same spot and it would really be bad. So the point I'm getting at is we have different strengths and weaknesses. And there are people that are really great at selling online. Well, why wouldn't you want them to be able to go do that? Go do that. If you want to do it 24 hours a day, go do it. So I think we're going to increasingly see, again, those that are not just protecting and defending the old way, but those that are embracing the fact that there are many different strengths and weaknesses that all of our people have. And let's provide tools for all of those different models. So if someone would say, again, I don't want to host parties, but I'm really good at online electronic communities, well, good. Let's put some best practices together and help them know how to do it and then share that with others.
Yeah. It sounds like what you're actually saying, Dan, is that it's kind of coming back to what we were talking about around the FTC, was that when we didn't have the data and we didn't really understand who our people are, A, we don't even know that they want to do it in different ways. And then B, if we knew that they wanted to do it in different ways, well, what different ways are there? How many different ways are people actually doing our business? And then how do we know who's who and how to support them best? Which is a very different way of looking at it.
Exactly. So I believe that the successful companies are going to be doing more like your interview was, where they're, helping really, and our distributors are also having some tools to know and decide what are the strengths and weaknesses of my sellers and what's the best path for them to have maximum success so that we can support them on that, instead of trying to teach them how to do something they'll never be good at anyway. Meaning, if you take someone that's really good at having personal home parties and they don't like computers, and you try to get them to be really good at online selling, you know what? You can try all you want, but it's going to be a tough sale. So let's play to people's strengths, and that's where data and analytics comes in again. Getting to really know what an individual's strengths and weaknesses are to benefit them, not to hurt them, but to help tailor and customize a program of success for them.
Absolutely. And there's so much opportunity in there as well. And I think that especially in direct selling, I mean, we've got companies, one of our customers at Direct Tech Labs, they're in 35 different countries. I mean, so you've got different languages, different cultures, different goals, different preconceptions of what it's about, different things that they can and cannot say about the health benefits of a product. And understanding all these different nuances really helps us to acutely get to know who these people are. And this is something that is a big change for a lot of companies. They're used to, we've been talking a lot with other guests about like the kind of executive mindset and how the value of an executive over the last, 20, 30 years, always in business, one of the main values an executive brought to the table was their good ideas. Right. And their ability to kind of like look at stuff and see pattern with their mind and say, oh, people are like this, our people are like this, and we need to treat them like that. Right. And that was one of the main sources of value from an executive, was that mind and that those ideas and their ability to spot those trends. But now with data and analytics, a computer can hold so many more variables than a person can, that we've got to be able to bring that into the mix too. Otherwise, people are going to find themselves being out-thunk by machines.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, increasingly, we're going to empower our sales channels, our people, with AI intelligence that they can just, in their own words, ask a question and get an answer. Mm-hmm. So there's, it's getting easier and easier to do that exact type of thing. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it now. Maybe that's another interview. But, the idea of an individual in a remote area using AI that only has a tablet or a smartphone, the answer is, oh, yeah, absolutely. You could do that.
Yeah, that's the cloud, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And if you don't do it, someone else will. Let's face it, anytime you use Siri or Google Home or ask Alexa with the Amazon Echo, anytime you use any of those things, you're not using the intelligence of your device. It's using the supercomputer in the cloud. That's where those devices reside, that artificial intelligence. And we're going to see that, again, come down to us and being able to use more and more. So to kind of bring this around, what I said in the beginning of this interview, I'll come back to, and that is feet on the street is what it used to be called. And that means local. So to understand local issues, local problems, local concerns, and they understand the human relationship, and they know the cultural differences and the community differences, whether it's an electronic community of interest or whether it is a physical community that you happen to live in. And that will continue to be extremely, extremely valuable and powerful as long as we, then now we're talking about the direct selling companies, provide them with the right tools and help them with the right mindset so that they can take advantage and, again, play to their strengths.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine if we had enough intelligence to know when a customer might need something or might want to buy something new. And I'll give you an example of how powerful. I mean, this was so big. I was talking to a board member of a company that has 600,000 distributors in the United States. And I asked her the question. I was like, just out of curiosity, what percentage of the population of Americans would you imagine lives within a 10 or 20 minute drive of one of your reps? And she was like, oh, easily 80%. And so I was like, so 80% of every American lives within a 20-minute drive of one of your sales reps. She's like, yeah. And those people aren't on payroll. No. So it's like, if we just needed to know, who to serve, you could get someone in there within 20 minutes to go serve them or upsell them or make sure they're having a better experience with whatever. And now build that relationship so when they want to buy something else, they come back.
Exactly. And if we realize it's not just about selling things, let's go back to the phrase that I gave you. It's really about economic empowerment of everyone. Again, that's the phrase I would use. That's when I gave that speech, I shared that in my speech last year at that keynote, that, this is really about economic empowerment as well as providing good products and so on. But
yeah, and that's what we've always had to do with our field. This is not a professional sales force, right? It's just regular people. And as a result, the more support we can give them and the more we can help them set their sails and point them in the right direction, a lot of time that's all they need. They just don't know what to do that's going to really make the most success for them. They've never done anything like this before in the vast, vast majority of cases. And a lot of people come from a work environment that they're used to, you just tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. But in direct selling, we love the freedom of being able to do whatever you want, but then there's no one to tell you what to do and then you don't know what to do. And so it's interesting.
Let me share an insight with you for all of our listeners to really think about here. And that is a CEO I was working with at a good sized company. He said to me, how do I find and hire extraordinary employees? And I responded by saying, they already work for you. You just haven't given them the ability and the tools to be extraordinary. My point is, not all, but the vast majority of people that you would consider to be extraordinary started out as ordinary people. Let's face it, did Mother Teresa, when she was 12 years old, say, hey, I'm going to grow up and be Mother Teresa and eventually a saint? And the answer is, well, no. At some point in her day, as she was growing up, she stopped being an ordinary person and started becoming an extraordinary person. And I think helping people to understand how to make that choice on a daily basis and how to become extraordinary, even though you're starting out as an ordinary person. Well, that's something that elevates all of humanity. And if the FTC understood the kinds of things that we really could do and the way that we can really help individuals and the way we could drive a new level and a new type of grassroots economic prosperity in a time where AI and artificial intelligence, as well as robots and everything else is coming in to automate, all of a sudden they may have a little different view of what this industry is about. And that's something, obviously, I'm advocating for.
Me too. And that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast and why we started the Source DS, was to really get a progressive conversation moving through the channel so that we could add more to what we do from a proactive perspective and showing the incredible potential and value that we have for people and for the economy and for just society as a whole as coming into the future. I mean, this really could be us moving into a golden age of direct selling. I mean, I don't think it's going to look exactly like it looks right now, but it's already really close. We just need to figure out which dials to turn, how many clicks, and we're there.
Yes, and just to take that phrase proactive, let me give you a new one. What does proactive mean? It means taking positive action now. And of course, how do you know it'll be positive? Well, you'll have to wait and see. Frankly, I don't like the odds. Let me give you a better word. And that is, I'd like you to be preactive to future known events. So when we can start seeing, hey, I can tell you what the FTC, they're going to continue to dig into you more unless you change how they think about the industry and help them to understand what it really is. I can see that those that are protecting and defending the old model of selling or distributing or doing what we do, they will continue to have increasing difficulties because the world is transforming and they're not. You have to ask yourself, are we changing as fast as our customers are changing? Are we learning as fast as our customers are learning? And in most cases, the answer is, well, no.
And that's the sort of cycle of it, isn't it, Dan? And if you are learning that, then you're getting the data. And if you're getting the data, you're learning what really works and what serves people the best. And if you're serving people the best and you're doing it with the data, you can be totally transparent with the FTC. And then now they're your BFF.
Yeah, exactly. And, the other thing is, I think people sometimes their eyes glass over when we use the word data. And data is kind of at the bottom of the chain. What I want is actionable insights. And that's what really comes from that data. In other words, we're talking about knowledge and wisdom. So the data is the underlying juice, the stuff that can give you those actionable real-time insights. And that's the payoff of really looking at and crunching the data together.
Great point. That's a really great button for the conversation, actually, Dan. I think the moral of the story of our conversation today really does come down to data and what kind of insights you can get out of that, what kind of good you can do with it, how it can affect your communications, your influence, your regulatory environment, and everything in the above. So, yeah, definitely a great button on that conversation. Dan, it's been an utter pleasure. Thank you so much. And I want to have you back again. Yours is a voice that I think more and more in the direct selling channel are already listening to and will be listening to in the future. And so we'll look forward to having you back on a future podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You can also go to Burrus, BURRUS.com if you want a little bit more on what I've been talking about.
Yeah, and I couldn't recommend it more. If this stuff resonates with you guys out there and you think you'd like to move some of this thinking and action through your organization, Burrus.com is an incredible resource, and Dan is just world-class, as you guys can hear. So thank you very much, Dan. It's been a pleasure, and we'll have you again soon.
You got it. Thank you.